The boy at my gate. I still remember the dust that evening, how it hung in the air like a curtain as the last students left the school compound. The sun was sliding down behind the mango trees, painting the old classroom blocks in tired shades of orange. I stayed back as usual, marking notebooks in the staff room of our small public school in Ibadan. When I finally locked my cupboard and began the short walk home, my mind was full of the same things it always carried: lesson notes for the following day, the unpaid debts at the market, my mother's hospital bills, and the quiet fear that my salary would not stretch to cover the month. By the time I reached my street, the sky had turned from orange to deep purple. Children were playing 10-10 near the roadside, their laughter echoing off the cracked walls. Generators were already humming in a far-off chorus. I pushed open the rusty gate to my compound and almost bumped into him. A boy, thin, dark, about 16 or 17. He stood just inside the gate as if he wasn't sure whether to enter or run away. His shirt was faded and missing a button. His school sandals were worn nearly flat. In his hand, he clutched a torn exercise book, pressed tightly against his chest. He stepped back quickly when he saw me. "Good evening, Ma," he said, voice barely above a whisper. I frowned slightly, not in anger, but in confusion. I didn't recognize him as one of my students. "Yes, can I help you?" I asked, shifting my bag on my shoulder. He swallowed, eyes darting from my face to the ground, then to the torn book in his hands. "Auntie, please, I heard you help students," he began, each word slow, careful, as if he had practiced the sentence before coming. I stood there, tired, dusty, hungry, wanting nothing more than to bathe and lie down. But there was something in his manner, fear, hope, desperation, all tangled together, that made me stay. "What is it?" I asked, a bit more gently. He opened the exercise book with trembling fingers. Folded neatly inside was a WAEC registration form, already filled with his details, but missing one crucial thing: the bank teller confirming payment. "My WAEC form," he said. "The deadline, they said, is tomorrow. My mother is sick. She has been in and out of the hospital. My father left when I was small. I tried to raise the money, but," his voice cracked, "please, just help me write the exam. I don't want to stop school now. I can work, I can pay you back later, I can." He stopped, unable to go on. The street outside seemed to go unnaturally quiet for a moment. "What's your name?" I asked. "Samuel, Ma," he replied, eyes still fixed on the ground. "Which class are you in?" "SS3, Ma, at community grammar school, just behind the market." I had never taught him. He wasn't from my school. Somewhere in my mind, a small, practical voice stood up and began to argue. "You are not his relative. You don't even know his surname. What if he is lying? You barely have enough for yourself. You still owe Mama Nkechi at the market. Your mother needs drugs. Your salary hasn't come. 19,000 naira is not small money." Then I remembered my own WAEC. I remembered how one of my mother's friends had paid my exam fees when my father's salary didn't come for 3 months. How that woman had handed the money to my mother and said, "Let the girl write. Education is the only inheritance we can truly give these children." That small kindness changed my life. Without that exam, I wouldn't have gone to teachers' college. I wouldn't have had any profession. I would have been another girl whose dreams died at the door of poverty. "Where is your mother now?" I asked. "At home, Ma. She sells fruits by the junction before she fell sick. Now some days she can't even get up," he replied. "How much have you paid already?" I asked quietly. He shook his head. "Nothing, Ma." I sighed and opened my handbag right there by the gate. Inside, I had 21,000 naira money I had carefully set aside for my last salary. 19,000 was the WAEC fee. The remaining 2,000 was what I planned to use for transport to visit my mother at the clinic over the weekend, plus small food items. I stared at the money, it stared back at me. For a few seconds, it felt like time stretched. I could hear a neighbor's radio playing somewhere, a generator coughing to life, the distant honk of Danfo buses. My heart pounded. "This money is not enough for you," that practical voice inside insisted. "Don't be foolish. You can't save everyone." Another voice, quieter but stronger, spoke just beneath it. "Someone once did this for you. This is your turn. Plant the seed." I looked up at the boy Samuel standing at my gate with that torn exercise book and eyes full of pleading. "All right," I said finally. "Give me the form." He handed it over quickly, as if afraid I would change my mind. Together, we walked to the small bank at the junction. The line was long, the air stuffy, but he stood beside me, silent, his fingers still trembling. When I paid the 19,000 naira, I felt the weight of every naira leaving my hand. I wrote my name and phone number on the form as his guardian, and handed it back to him. He stared at the teller copy in disbelief, then at me. "Auntie, I don't have words," he said, finally, voice shaking. "God will bless you. I will make you proud. I promise. I will not waste this chance." I smiled tiredly. "Just read your books, Samuel. Pass your exams. That's all the thanks I need." He walked away, turning back every few steps to bow and wave. Then, like many people who pass through our lives, he disappeared. Days turned into months. The school year rolled on. I buried my worries in lesson notes, read pens, and staff meetings. I thought of Samuel occasionally, when I saw other SS3 students studying under the mango tree. I hope his rating, I would think. Eventually, life's trouble swallowed his memory. Years began to move like pages in a fast-flipping book. My mother's condition worsened. Hospital bills grew. The government delayed our salaries again and again. Then, one bleak Harmattan morning, I arrived at school to find a letter waiting for me in the staff room. Budget cuts. Redundancy. I was one of the excess teachers they could no longer afford. Just like that, after over a decade of teaching, I was told my services were no longer required. I packed my books, my few certificates, my small kettle for making tea, and walked out of that compound fighting tears. 3 months later, my mother died. Between the no-salary months, her hospital costs, and the funeral expenses, my savings vanished. Baden, once familiar and comforting, began to feel like a place where the walls were closing in on me. One evening, as I sat in the dark because I couldn't buy fuel for the generator, a friend called from Lagos. "Sage," she said, "come to Lagos. At least there's more opportunity here. Stay with me for a while. You can look for something to do. You can't just be sitting there." So I packed my life into one small Ghana must-go bag: dresses, a few textbooks, some documents, my worn Bible, and boarded a night bus to Lagos. Lagos was noise and movement and hustle. For months, I became one of many job seekers moving from office to office, dropping CVS, filling forms, waiting in crowded reception areas. Almost always led to polite rejections. One afternoon, when hope was beginning to taste like something bitter, I received an email. A multinational company was hiring for an educational outreach position. They needed someone with a background in teaching, community work, and youth development. The email said I had passed the first screening based on my CV. I had an interview. I stared at the screen for a long time, reading the message over and over. The company name alone was intimidating: big, international, powerful. I wondered how my small experience from a public school and Baden could stand in such a place. But it was a door, even if it was just slightly open. The night before the interview, I washed my best dress, a simple navy blue gown I had worn to weddings and church services for years. I polished my old black shoes until they looked almost new. I borrowed a small handbag from my friend to look more corporate. Then, for the first time in weeks, I knelt down properly to pray. "God," I whispered, "I don't have connections. I don't have money. I don't have any strong relative to speak for me. All I have is you and these years of teaching. If this is my door, please, don't let it close." The next morning, I arrived at the company's glass building in Victoria Island an hour early. The cold air from their air conditioners hit me as soon as I stepped inside. The receptionist gave me a tag and directed me to a waiting area. Men and women in expensive suits sat around, scrolling through their phones, adjusting their ties, murmuring rehearsed answers to possible interview questions. When they called my name, my heart thudded loudly in my chest. I walked into the interview room, trying not to let my nervousness show. Inside, 3 people sat behind a long table: an older woman with glasses, a middle-aged man with a laptop, and a young lady who seemed to be taking notes. Near the corner of the room, another young woman sat with a probably an HR assistant. "Good morning," I greeted, forcing a smile. They responded politely. The HR assistant looked through my file and said, "Madam Say, thank you for coming. This is the first stage. The final decision, however, will come from our new regional director. This young but brilliant, very passionate about youth empowerment. He likes to sit in on these interviews." I nodded, gripping my handbag a little tighter. "We're just waiting for him to join us," she added. This on another call. My mind raced. A regional director? Young and brilliant? I suddenly imagined a sharp-looking foreign-educated Nigerian, probably with degrees from the UK or US, speaking big English and looking down on my small NCE and years of public school teaching. I remembered the days I had gone to school on an empty stomach, the times I had stayed behind to tutor students for free. None of that was written on any certificate. Would any of it matter to a young, brilliant director? The door opened. We all turned. A tall man walked in, confident, well-dressed in a dark suit that fit him perfectly. He carried a leather folder and the kind of calm authority that filled a room without effort. He moved toward the table, nodding a greeting. Then his eyes landed on me. He stopped. He stared. Something flickered across his face, a confusion, surprise, then something like recognition. "Excuse me," he said slowly, looking directly at me. "Were you once a teacher in Ibadan?" The room went silent. The other interviewers looked from him to me, puzzled. "Yes," I replied, startled. "Government secondary school, Badia Axis. And before that, you paid for my WAEC," he said. The exercise book, the torn form, the trembling hands, the boy at my gate. It all rushed back like a wave crashing over me. My mouth fell open slightly. "Samuel," I whispered, almost afraid to hope. He smiled, being a smile that transformed his whole face, softening the sharp lines of responsibility, revealing the boy he once was. His eyes shone. "Yes, Ma, it's me, Samuel," he said quietly. "You paid for my WAEC." He turned to the people seated at the table. "I'm going to pause this interview for a moment," he said, voice firm but emotional. He placed his folder on the table, then looked at each of them in turn. "Everyone, please listen. This woman sitting here, I'm not sure she even remembers me. I was a poor boy in Ibadan. My mother was sick. I had nobody. The deadline for WAEC was 1 day away. I went to her house because I heard she sometimes helped students." He glanced at me again, eyes now glassy. "She had only a little money. It was all she had for herself and her mother. But she gave almost everything so that I could write WAEC. That exam changed my life. It opened the door for me to get a scholarship. From there, I went to university, then got a chance to study abroad. Every certificate I have, every position I hold, I trace it back to one torn exercise book and one woman's sacrifice." Silence. The kind of silence that carries weight. The older woman with glasses adjusted them, looking at me with new eyes. The man with the laptop paused his typing. The HR assistant's mouth was slightly open in surprise. Samuel continued, voice steady now but thick with emotion. "I am who I am because one woman saw me as more than just a poor boy standing at her gate. She didn't know my future. She didn't even know my surname. But she believed enough to plant a seed. I owe her my entire career." He turned fully to face me. "Anti-teacher," he said softly, using the name I hadn't heard in years. "This job is yours. Whatever the title, whatever the salary, consider it done. But more than that," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "For life." Tears blurred my vision. I blinked rapidly, struggling to hold them back. For years, I had wondered if any of the little sacrifices I made as a teacher meant anything. The extra lessons, the money I spent on chalk when the school ran out, the times I gave up my own lunch for hungry students. In that air-conditioned boardroom, face to face with the boy at my Gatineau, a regional director in a multinational company, I had my answer. The interview didn't proceed in the usual way after that. Yes, they still asked me questions, but the atmosphere had changed. They weren't just assessing me anymore. They were honoring a story none of them had expected to hear that day. A week later, I received my official offer letter. Today, I work in that company not just as a staff member, but as a board advisor on youth outreach. My small beginnings as a public school teacher became my greatest qualification. I helped design programs for students in rural areas, create scholarship opportunities, and train young teachers who want to make a difference. On my first month in the company, Samuel called me into his office. "I've been thinking," he said. "I want to start a scholarship fund for students like me, ones who have the potential but no money, and I want to name it after you." I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. Today, there is a scholarship in my name. Every year, it supports dozens of students across Nigeria, boys from mechanic villages, girls from remote communities, teenagers who sell in traffic by day and read under streetlights by night. I mentor many of the girls personally. Some of them remind me of who I was at their age, bright, determined, and sure if the world has space for their dreams. Whenever they say, "Auntie, thank you," I think of the woman who once paid my own WAEC and of the day Samuel stood at my gate. Sometimes, when we have high-profile meetings at the company and I see Samuel in his sharp suits, exchanging handshakes with important guests, I still catch glimpses of the boy with the torn exercise book. After one such meeting, as we walked down the corridor together, he smiled and said quietly, "Annie-teacher, do you remember that your rusty gate in Ibadan?" I nodded, smiling. "I remember," I replied. "I remember thinking I was just helping one boy to write one exam. And you were," he said. But God was planting a whole forest through that one seed. That sentence stayed with me, because in truth, I hadn't seen it that way. The day I took that 19,000 from my bag, all I saw was a problem and a need. I didn't see a regional director. I didn't see a multinational company. I didn't see a scholarship in my name. I didn't see boardrooms. If I had listened only to fear that day, Samuel might never have taken WAEC. He might never have left that small community. He might be somewhere now, still struggling, his potential buried under the weight of poverty. And my own story might have been different. I might never have found my way into rooms where decisions are made. I might never have mentored the girls whose lives are now changing. That one decision at my gate didn't just change his life, it changed mine. Microphones or youth conferences. I just saw a skinny boy standing at a gate. Now, when I look back, I realize something. God was testing me with a seed that didn't look like anything special, a seed that, to the practical eye, looked like a burden, an expense, a foolish risk. I almost missed the forest it would grow. Here's what I know now. Kindness is a seed. You may plant it today and walk away, thinking nothing of it. You may even forget the face of the person you helped. You may never hear a thank you. You may never see the tree grow. But seeds are patient. They grow quietly in hidden soil, watered by time, nourished by the God who sees in secret. And in ways you cannot predict, they always find their way